The shadow fell over Tertius 7 mining colony just after the second shift ended. Workers looked up from their drilling equipment and froze. Something massive was blocking out the sun. Most of them scrambled for the emergency shelters, thinking it was another corporate raid. The alarms hadn't gone off yet, but that didn't mean much out here on the frontier. But this wasn't a warship descending from the clouds. Rebecca Hayes stood in the central square, her coffee mug still halfway to her lips as the creature landed. The impact shook the ground hard enough to crack the concrete beneath its claws. She'd been administrator of this miserable little colony for 6 years now, and she'd seen plenty of strange things. Pirates. Corporate enforcers. Once, a trader showed up with what he claimed was a genuine old Earth artifact, though it turned out to be a fancy toaster. But she'd never seen a dragon. Nobody had. They were stories. Legends from Earth, back when humanity still lived on one planet and dreamed about the stars. Beautiful myths parents told children at bedtime. Except this one was real. And it was bleeding. The dragon's scales shimmered like molten copper in the afternoon light, each one the size of Rebecca's hand. Energy burns scarred its flanks, the kind of damage you got from military-grade plasma weapons. Its wings, even folded, were larger than the administration building. When it turned its massive head toward her, Rebecca saw something in those ancient eyes that made her forget to be afraid. Desperation. The dragon opened its mouth and Rebecca braced herself for fire or a roar that would shatter windows. Instead, a small device clattered onto the concrete between them. Old human tech, modified with something that definitely wasn't human engineering. The device crackled, sparked, then projected a voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "I am Caraxus." The voice was deep, resonant, but the translation was rough, words overlapping and echoing strangely. "I come seeking aid." Rebecca set down her coffee. Behind her, she heard colonists emerging from buildings, whispering, some recording on their devices. She raised a hand to keep them back. "You're a long way from wherever dragons live. Must be important." The device sparked again, and suddenly images flooded Rebecca's mind. Not words this time, but pure thought, raw emotion transmitted directly into her consciousness. She gasped, nearly fell, caught herself against a cargo container. She saw dragon cities that made human architecture look like children's blocks. Spires of crystal that sang in the wind. Forests that glowed with their own light. Technology that blended so seamlessly with nature you couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. A civilization that had mastered genetic engineering before humans even discovered fire. And she saw the children dying. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands. Dragon hatchlings in vast healing chambers, their scales losing their luster, their bodies convulsing. The images showed healers working frantically, ancient dragons who'd lived for millennia trying everything they knew. Magic that could reshape matter. Technology that could cure diseases humans hadn't even discovered yet. Nothing worked. The telepathic connection broke. Rebecca staggered, breathing hard. How long has this been happening? 2 years, 4 months, 13 days. Caraxus's translated voice carried a weight that transcended language. "We have tried everything within our knowledge. Every cure, every treatment, every ancient remedy passed down through 10,000 years of civilization. The young continue to die. We are desperate." One of the colonists shouted from behind Rebecca. "Why come to us? We're just miners. Barely keeping this place running." Caraxus's head swung toward the voice, and the colonists stumbled backward. But when the dragon spoke again, there was no anger. Only humiliation. "Because we have failed. Because our pride has blinded us. Because dragons have looked down upon humanity since your species first left your homeworld, and now we must beg the youngest civilization in the galaxy for help." Rebecca understood then. This wasn't just about saving lives. For a species as old and proud as dragons, coming here was like a master craftsman admitting they couldn't figure out how to use a hammer. It went against everything they were. She studied the dragon more carefully now. Looked past the intimidating size, the obvious power, the scales that could probably deflect small arms fire. She looked at the way Caraxus held himself, wings drooping slightly. The careful way he kept his claws retracted, trying to appear less threatening. The tremor in his voice when he spoke about the children. "Show me more about the symptoms," Rebecca said. "Everything you know about how this started, how it spreads, what happens to them." Caraxus hesitated, then opened the telepathic link again. This time Rebecca was ready for it. She watched the progression carefully. The way the illness attacked the hatchlings' nervous systems first. How their own magical cores, the source of dragon power, seemed to turn against them. The timeline of the spread, starting in one region and gradually expanding across their entire homeworld. She asked 3 questions out loud, more to organize her own thoughts than anything. When exactly did the first cases appear? What's the geographic pattern of the spread? Are the symptoms worse in hatchlings that live near water sources? Caraxus's eyes widened. The dragon actually took a step back, which given his size meant Rebecca had to crane her neck up even more. How did you know about the water connection? Our healers only discovered that correlation 6 months ago. Rebecca felt something click in her mind. A pattern she'd seen before years ago, back when she worked in the deep stations. When she'd spent 15 years of her life breathing recycled air and dealing with toxic waste that could kill you in a dozen creative ways. I don't think your children have a plague, she said quietly. I think they've been poisoned. The square went silent. Even the ever-present hum of mining equipment seemed to fade away. Poisoned? Caraxus's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. But by what? Our world is pristine. We have maintained it for millennia. We would know if something toxic entered our environment. Would you? Rebecca challenged. Has your species ever had to deal with industrial contamination before? Environmental disasters? Chemical warfare? She saw the answer in the dragon's confused expression. That's what I thought. You've never poisoned anything because you've never needed to clean up a mess like this. But humans? We've poisoned half our colonies at one point or another. Which means we've gotten really good at figuring out how to fix it. She turned to the crowd behind her. Most of the colonists were still staring at Caraxus with a mixture of fear and awe, but a few familiar faces stood out. Grant, get your medical kit. Laura, pull up everything we have on environmental contamination analysis. And someone grab every chemical scanner this colony owns. We're about to take a field trip. Grant Wilson, the colony's mining medic, pushed through the crowd. He was a gruff man in his 50s who'd patched up more chemical burns and toxic exposure cases than most hospital doctors. You planning what I think you're planning, boss? Depends. You thinking I'm crazy enough to visit a dragon homeworld? Yeah, that's what I figured. He grinned. About time something interesting happened around here. Laura Peterson, their sanitation engineer, was already pulling up data on her tablet. She'd kept this colony's water systems running through 3 equipment failures and a contamination scare that would have killed everyone if she hadn't caught it. Rebecca, if this is what I think it is, we're going to need more than scanners. We'll need processing equipment, filtration systems, maybe even excavation gear. Rebecca looked back at Caraxus. The dragon hadn't moved, watching this exchange with something that might have been hope dawning in those ancient eyes. Here's the deal, Rebecca said. We'll come to your world. We'll figure out what's killing your children. And if I'm right about this being poison, we'll show you how to clean it up. But you need to understand something first. No dragon has ever let humans on your homeworld, right? Never, Caraxus confirmed. So you're about to break a pretty major taboo. Your people aren't going to like this. Probably going to hate it, actually. Proud species don't like admitting they need help from anyone, especially from humans they've always looked down on. Rebecca crossed her arms. You ready for that? Ready to watch ancient dragons lose their minds when you show up with a human crew? Caraxus was quiet for a long moment. Then he turned his head, looking toward the sky. Following his gaze, Rebecca could just barely make out a faint shimmer in the upper atmosphere. A ship, cloaked but not perfectly. Other dragons, waiting to see if this desperate gamble would pay off. My daughter is dying, Caraxus said, his voice barely audible through the translator. She is 3 years old by your counting. She loves to fly through the crystal forests and sing with the wind. Last week she could barely lift her head. This morning she did not recognize me. The dragon's voice cracked. I will endure any humiliation, face any scorn from my people, if there is even the smallest chance you can save her. Rebecca felt her throat tighten. She'd never had kids herself, but she understood that kind of desperation. The kind that made you abandon everything you believed in, everything you were, just for a chance to protect someone you loved. All right then. She turned back to her people. Grant, Laura, pack for an extended trip. Everyone else, keep the colony running while we're gone. And if we're not back in a month. She paused, thinking. Actually, if we're not back in a month, we're probably dead, so it won't matter much. A few nervous laughs rippled through the crowd. Caraxus lowered his head, bringing one massive eye level with Rebecca. You would do this? Risk everything to help a species that has shown yours nothing but contempt. You risked everything coming here, Rebecca pointed out. Besides, those kids didn't do anything to deserve this. Nobody's children should have to die because adults are too proud or stupid to ask for help. She picked up her coffee, took a sip, made a face because it had gone cold. Give us 2 hours to prep. Then we'll follow you home and see if we can fix this mess. As she walked away to coordinate the preparations, Rebecca heard one of the younger colonists whisper to another, "Is she insane? Going to a dragon world? They could kill her the second she arrives." Maybe. But Rebecca had spent her entire adult life dealing with impossible situations and somehow making them work. She'd kept this colony alive through corporate negligence, equipment failures, and the general chaos of frontier life. How much harder could saving a dragon civilization be? The journey to Dracarthal took 3 days through hyperspace, following Caraxus's ship. Rebecca spent most of that time reviewing everything she knew about toxic contamination while Grant organized medical supplies and Laura ran diagnostics on their scanning equipment. When they finally dropped out of hyperspace, the view through the forward viewport made all 3 humans stop what they were doing and just stare. Dracarthal wasn't just beautiful. It was impossible. Crystalline spires rose from the surface, some of them reaching high enough to pierce the cloud layer. Forests glowed with soft bioluminescence even in daylight, creating patterns of light that shifted like living things. Cities sprawled across the landscape, but they didn't look built so much as grown, architecture that flowed and curved in ways that hurt to look at too long. Rivers of liquid light wound between structures, and the sky itself seemed to shimmer with colors Rebecca didn't have names for. "Well," Grant said after a long silence, "we're definitely not in Kansas anymore." Laura pressed her face against the viewport. "Is that city floating? Please tell me I'm seeing things." "You're not seeing things," Rebecca confirmed. "And we're about to land right in the middle of it. Everyone remember the plan. Be respectful, don't touch anything unless invited, and for the love of everything holy, don't stare at the dying children." The landing pad was larger than their entire mining colony. As their small transport touched down, Rebecca could see dragons everywhere. Dozens of them, ranging from ones barely larger than horses to massive ancients that made Caraxus look small. And every single one of them was watching the human ship with expressions that didn't need translation. Contempt. Disgust. Barely restrained anger. "They really don't want us here," Grant muttered, checking his medical kit one more time. "Can you blame them?" Rebecca straightened her jacket. "Imagine if Earth was dying and we had to ask some species we'd always looked down on for help. We'd be pretty bitter too." The ramp lowered. The air that rushed in was warm, carrying scents Rebecca couldn't identify. Sweet but sharp, like ozone mixed with flowers. She took a deep breath and stepped out, Grant and Laura flanking her. Caraxus waited at the base of the ramp, along with another dragon whose scales were deep emerald green streaked with silver. This one was even larger than Caraxus, and the look in its eyes made Rebecca want to crawl back into the ship. "This is High Healer Verathorn," Caraxus said, his translator working better now that they were on his homeworld. "He leads our medical efforts." Verathorn's lip curled, revealing teeth the size of daggers. "So these are the primitives who will supposedly solve what our greatest minds cannot." His voice dripped with scorn. "Humans who still struggle with basic genetic manipulation. Who die from diseases we cured 10,000 years ago. What possible help could such creatures offer?" Rebecca met the dragon's glare without flinching. "The kind of help that comes from making mistakes and learning how to fix them. You want to keep insulting us or you want to save your kids? Because I can get back on that ship right now if you'd prefer." Verathorn's eyes narrowed dangerously. For a moment Rebecca thought she'd pushed too far. Then Caraxus stepped between them. "Please," he said quietly. "My daughter is in the healing chambers. At least let them see before we judge." The healer snorted, a sound like steam escaping from a pressure valve, but turned and began walking. Rebecca and her team followed, trying not to gawk at everything around them. The paths were made of some material that felt soft underfoot but supported their weight perfectly. Structures towered overhead, their surfaces rippling with patterns of light that might have been decoration or might have been information displays. Other dragons watched them pass. Some with curiosity, most with hostility. A few younger ones tried to approach, but their elders quickly pulled them back. The healing chambers were underground, accessed through a spiral ramp that descended for what felt like miles. The temperature dropped as they went deeper, and the bioluminescent light shifted from warm golds to cool blues. Finally, they emerged into a vast cavern that made Rebecca's breath catch. Hundreds of hatchlings lay in individual chambers carved from crystal. Each one glowed softly, sustained by what looked like pure energy flowing through channels in the rock. Dragon healers moved between them, ancient creatures whose scales had faded with age, checking readings on displays that floated in midair. And everywhere Rebecca heard the sound of suffering. Weak cries, labored breathing, the occasional convulsion that made the healers rush over with desperate urgency. "Sweet mercy," Laura whispered. Grant was already moving toward the nearest hatchling, his medical instincts overriding his fear. The young dragon was barely the size of a large dog, its scales a dull bronze that should have been vibrant gold. It trembled constantly, eyes half closed, breathing in short gasps. "May I examine this one?" Grant asked, looking at Verathorn. The healer waved dismissively. "Do what you wish. Your primitive tools will tell you nothing we don't already know." Grant pulled out his medical scanner, a basic device that most frontier medics carried. It could analyze blood chemistry, detect toxins, measure vital signs. Simple technology compared to what dragons probably had, but Grant had been using versions of this scanner for 30 years. He knew what normal readings looked like. He ran the scanner over the hatchling. Frowned. Ran it again. Then went completely still. "Rebecca," he said, his voice strange. "You need to see this." She moved to his side, looking at the scanner's display. The readings were color-coded, green for normal, yellow for concerning, red for dangerous. The entire screen was red. But it wasn't the right kind of red. "These aren't plague symptoms," Grant said slowly. "This is heavy metal poisoning. See these markers here? And here? This is exactly what you'd see in someone exposed to industrial toxins. I've treated this 100 times in miners who got careless around processing equipment." Rebecca felt her stomach drop. She'd suspected, but having confirmation was different. "You're sure?" "Completely. Look at the neurological damage patterns. The way the toxins are concentrating in developing tissue. This poor thing's being poisoned, has been for months probably." He looked up at Verathorn. "Have you tested your water sources?" The dragon healer's expression shifted from contempt to confusion. "Water? Our springs have sustained our civilization for 10 millennia. They are pure, filtered through natural crystal formations that remove any impurities." "Natural formations designed to handle natural contaminants," Laura cut in. She'd been listening while pulling up data on her tablet. "What about artificial ones? Industrial chemicals? Heavy metals from manufacturing?" "We have no such industries on Dracarthal," Verathorn said, but his voice had lost its certainty. "We abandoned crude manufacturing methods thousands of years ago. Our technology is clean, sustainable, integrated with nature." "Then where did the toxins come from?" Rebecca pressed. "Grant, can you tell what kind of metals we're dealing with?" He ran another scan. "Looks like a cocktail. Refined uranium derivatives, processed thorium compounds, synthetic heavy metals I don't even recognize. This isn't natural contamination. This is industrial waste." Caraxes had been silent, but now he spoke up. "When did the first cases appear?" One of the older healers checked a floating display. 847 days ago. 3 hatchlings in the Northern Territories. We thought it was a mutation, some genetic abnormality. Then more cases appeared, spreading south." "What happened 847 days ago?" Rebecca asked. The dragons exchanged glances. Finally Verathorn answered, his voice heavy. "A human mining corporation attempted to establish operations on our second moon. We considered it a violation of our territory. We destroyed their station." "Destroyed how?" Laura's fingers were already flying over her tablet. "Completely. We used plasma weapons to reduce it to debris. We ensured no trace remained that could threaten our sovereignty." Rebecca closed her eyes. "The debris. Where did it go?" "Into space, we assumed. Perhaps some fell to the moon's surface, but..." Caraxes stopped. His eyes went wide with horrified understanding. "It fell here. The wreckage fell to Dracarthal." Laura pulled up atmospheric data, orbital mechanics, debris field projections. A station that size, destroyed in high orbit around the moon, would have scattered wreckage everywhere. Some of it would have been pulled into Dracarthal's gravity well. "Look at this trajectory model. Tons of material would have burned up in your upper atmosphere, which would have vaporized the refined metals and industrial chemicals," Grant added. "Turn them into fine particles that would settle into your weather patterns, get absorbed into clouds, fall as rain, seep into groundwater." Verathorn staggered, actually stumbled backward. For a creature that size to show physical shock was terrifying. "We did this. Our own actions. Our pride. We destroyed that station without considering what would happen to the debris. Without thinking about environmental impact. We just wanted them gone." "Your filtration systems," Rebecca said gently. "They work on natural minerals, organic compounds, things that have always been in your environment. But industrial toxins? Synthetic metals? They pass right through. You had no reason to design filters for something that shouldn't exist here. And the hatchlings, one of the younger healers said, voice breaking. They're smaller. Still developing. The same exposure that an adult can tolerate would devastate them. The chamber fell silent except for the sounds of suffering. Rebecca watched ancient dragons, beings who'd lived for thousands of years, grapple with the realization that their own arrogance had poisoned their children. Caraxus approached one of the crystal chambers where a tiny hatchling lay. Rebecca recognized the dull golden scales. His daughter. He pressed his massive head against the crystal, and for the first time Rebecca heard a dragon make a sound of pure grief. We thought ourselves so advanced, Verathorn said quietly. So much wiser than younger species. We looked down on humans for their pollution, their careless destruction of their own worlds. And we did the same thing without even realizing it. Rebecca moved to stand beside the high healer. She had to crane her neck up to look at him, but she put a hand on the dragon's scaled leg. The gesture was absurd, a tiny human trying to comfort a creature the size of a building. But Verathorn looked down at her, and something in his ancient eyes softened. Pride didn't poison your children, Rebecca said. Ignorance did. You didn't know because you'd never had to know. You've never polluted anything before, never had to clean up this kind of mess. She squeezed his leg gently. But we have. Humans have poisoned dozens of our worlds. We've made every mistake you can imagine when it comes to environmental disasters. And we've learned how to fix them. Can you fix this? Caraxus asked, not looking away from his daughter. Truly? Grant and Laura exchanged glances. Laura pulled up more data. Maybe. But Rebecca, there's a problem. A big one. She showed her tablet to the group. The screen displayed a map of Dracarthal with heat signatures overlaid. Red zones covered nearly a third of the planet. These are contamination readings based on the atmospheric modeling. The toxins aren't just in one area. They're in your entire water table now, spreading through underground aquifers. It would take decades, maybe centuries, for natural processes to flush them out. And with more orbital debris still settling, Grant added grimly, the contamination levels are increasing. You've got maybe 6 months, maybe less, before even adult dragons start showing symptoms. Your entire civilization is living on borrowed time. The dragons reacted to this news with visible distress. Some roared, the sound shaking dust from the cavern ceiling. Others simply slumped, the weight of despair too heavy even for their massive frames. Then we evacuate, Caraxus said, forcing his voice to remain steady. We find another world. Begin again. Our civilization is old. We will endure. Or, Rebecca interrupted, you let us fix this. Every dragon turned to look at her. There's another option. Humans have technology for this exact situation. Industrial-scale filtration, water processing, soil remediation, atmospheric scrubbing. We've cleaned up worse than this. She paused, knowing what she had to say next would hurt. But it'll cost you something more valuable than money or trade agreements. What? Verathorn demanded. Your pride, Rebecca said bluntly. Because to fix this, we'll need to bring in a full environmental cleanup operation. Ships, equipment, processing plants, hundreds of workers. We'll need to establish bases here, dig into your planet, process your water through human technology. You'll have to watch humans crawling all over your sacred world for months, maybe years. The silence was deafening. You're asking us to allow a human mining operation on Dracarthal, Verathorn said slowly. To let the very type of corporation whose wreckage caused this catastrophe come here and save your species, Rebecca finished. Yes, that's exactly what I'm asking. Let us help. Let us do what we're actually good at, which is cleaning up environmental disasters. Swallow your pride and accept that maybe, just maybe, the primitive humans know something you don't. She looked around at the assembled dragons, at the dying hatchlings, at the ancient beings struggling with an impossible choice. Your children are running out of time, she said softly. What's more important? Your pride or their lives? The Dragon Council convened within hours. Rebecca had expected some grand chamber with thrones and formal proceedings. Instead, she found herself standing in a circular amphitheater carved from living crystal, open to the sky. Hundreds of dragons perched on ledges that spiraled upward, their scales creating a kaleidoscope of colors that shifted in the sunlight. She felt very, very small. Caraxus stood beside her, along with Grant and Laura. Verathorn had positioned himself on the opposite side of the circle, and Rebecca noticed he wasn't meeting anyone's eyes. The shame of what they'd discovered still hung heavy over the high healer. Elder Thorzan descended from the highest perch. He was massive, even by dragon standards, his scales faded to almost white with age. Scars crisscrossed his body, remnants of battles fought millennia before humans even existed. When he spoke, his voice resonated through the amphitheater without any need for translation devices. "We are here to discuss an abomination," Thorzen began. "Not the poison that kills our young, though that is tragedy enough. No, we discuss the suggestion that we invite humans of all species to defile our sacred homeworld with their crude technology and destructive methods." Rebecca opened her mouth to respond, but Caraxes touched her shoulder gently with one claw, shaking his head slightly. "Let them talk first," his expression said. So she waited, forcing herself to stay calm while dragons debated her proposal. "Humans are barely civilized," a younger dragon called out. "They strip their worlds bare, poison their own atmospheres, wage wars over resources they'll exhaust within generations. And we would trust them with Drakerthal? They caused this crisis in the first place," another added. "Their mining station, their industrial filth. Now they offer to fix what they broke, but at what cost?" "The cost is our dignity," Thorzen said heavily. "For 10,000 years, we have maintained our world in perfect harmony. We have never needed outside help, never stooped to begging lesser species for assistance. And now, in our moment of weakness, we consider allowing humans who still struggle with basic ecological balance to teach us about environmental stewardship." The murmur of agreement rippled through the assembly. Rebecca felt her jaw clench. She'd expected resistance, but hearing it laid out so clearly made her blood boil. These dragons were so convinced of their own superiority that they'd rather let their children die than admit humans might know something useful. Then a small voice spoke up from one of the lower perches. "You taught me that wisdom means knowing when to ask for help." Every dragon turned. Starscale, the young hatchling Rebecca had seen in the healing chambers, clung to a ledge near the bottom of the amphitheater. She looked stronger than before but still frail, her scales dull and her movements shaky. Two older dragons immediately moved to support her, trying to guide her back down. "Little one, you should be resting," Verathorn called out gently. "I've been resting for months," Starscale said, her voice weak but determined. "I'm tired of resting. I want to fly again. I want to sing with the wind like I used to." She looked around at the assembled elders. "You always told us that the truly wise know their limitations. That strength comes from recognizing what you don't know and seeking knowledge wherever it can be found. Were you lying?" The silence that followed was deafening. Rebecca saw several of the older dragons actually flinch at the question. Thorzen's expression softened as he looked at the young dragon. "We were not lying, child. But this is different. These are humans. They figured out what was wrong with us in less than an hour," Starscale interrupted. "Something our greatest healers couldn't discover in 2 years. Maybe they're not as primitive as you think." Rebecca decided this was her moment. She stepped forward, ignoring the threatening growls from some of the dragons. "Elder Thorzen, with respect, you're right about humans. We are destructive. We are short-sighted. We've poisoned half the worlds we've colonized and we're still learning how to fix our mistakes." She pulled out Laura's tablet and projected the holographic data into the center of the amphitheater. Images of human worlds appeared, before and after shots that made several dragons recoil. "This is Ganymede Station. 50 years ago it was a toxic wasteland. Chemical plants had poisoned the entire moon. The air was unbreathable. The water was acid. Nothing could live there." She switched the image to show a thriving city with parks and waterways. "This is Ganymede now. Population 2 million. Clean air, clean water, sustainable agriculture. We did that." She showed more examples. Colony after colony that had been ruined by industrial accidents, corporate greed, or just plain stupidity. And every single one of them eventually cleaned up, restored, made livable again. "You want to know why humans can fix this when you can't?" Rebecca's voice carried across the amphitheater. "Because we've had to. We don't have your magic, your advanced genetics, your thousands of years of accumulated wisdom. What we have is experience making terrible mistakes and then living with the consequences. We've gotten really, really good at environmental cleanup because we've had to learn or die." "This is hardly a recommendation," Thorzen pointed out. "You speak of your species' failures as if they were achievements. They're not achievements. They're lessons." Rebecca met his ancient gaze without fear. "Every dead world taught us something. Every poison water table, every toxic atmosphere, every ecosystem we destroyed and then desperately tried to save. We learned from pain and necessity. You've never had to learn these lessons because you've never made these mistakes. Your civilization is cleaner, wiser, more advanced than ours in almost every way." She paused. "But not in this. Not in cleaning up industrial contamination. Not in environmental remediation. Not in undoing damage that's already been done. That's our specialty because it's had to be. Laura stepped forward, adding her voice. The company we're recommending is Terraform Solutions. They don't mine, they don't extract resources, they only clean. They've restored 14 colonies in the last 20 years. Their success rate is 97%. And the other 3%? A dragon asked. One world was too far gone before they started. One had political issues that prevented them from finishing. And one, Laura admitted, they made worse before they figured out the right approach. They're not perfect, but they're the best humanity has. Grant pulled up technical specifications. Here's what they'd need to do. First, extract contaminated water from your spring systems using industrial pumps. Process it through chemical filtration arrays to remove heavy metals. The clean water gets re-injected into the aquifers through carefully placed wells. Simultaneously, they'd need to remove the orbital debris still falling. That means ships in your atmosphere, collecting wreckage before it burns up and adds more contamination. Then there's soil remediation using specially engineered bacteria that consume heavy metals and convert them to inert compounds. Timeline is 18 months, Rebecca added. Maybe 2 years if the contamination is worse than we think. Cost is expensive, but dragons have resources to trade. The payment they're asking for is knowledge exchange. Your medical technology, your genetic research in return for our environmental engineering. You want our most precious secrets, Verathorn said quietly. In exchange for cleaning up a mess that humans created in the first place. A mess your own actions made worse, Rebecca countered, not unkindly. You destroyed that station without thinking about where the debris would go. Human greed put it there, but dragon pride spread the contamination across your world. There's plenty of blame to go around. The question is whether you want to fix it or keep arguing about who's at fault. Thorzen descended from his perch, landing in the center of the amphitheater with enough force to crack the crystal floor. He moved close to Rebecca, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his scales, smell something like cinnamon and smoke on his breath. And what guarantee do we have that these humans won't betray us? His voice was soft now, dangerous. We would be exposing everything we are to a species known for exploitation. What stops them from stealing our technology? From mapping our defenses? From returning later with weapons instead of cleaning equipment? Rebecca held his gaze. Absolutely nothing. You're right. We could do all of that. We could take advantage of your desperation, learn everything about your civilization, and use it against you later. She saw several dragons tense, ready to strike. But she wasn't finished. But here's what you're missing. If we betray you, we prove to every single species in the galaxy that humans can't be trusted with anything important. We'd be painting a target on our entire civilization. Every trade agreement, every alliance, every diplomatic relationship we've built over the last 2 centuries would collapse. We'd be alone in a galaxy that already barely tolerates us. Rebecca spread her hands. Your pride is on the line here. I get that. But so is our future. We betray you and humanity becomes the species nobody will ever work with again. We help you successfully, and we prove that humans can be trusted with the most important, sensitive, desperate situations. That we can set aside profit and exploitation when lives are at stake. Pretty words, an older dragon muttered. Words cost nothing. You're right, Rebecca agreed. So let me offer something more concrete. I'll stay here. Personally. While the cleanup happens, I remain on Drakerthal as your guest. If Terraform Solutions betrays your trust in any way, you can hold me accountable. My life is guarantee of their good behavior. Rebecca, no, Grant started, but she silenced him with a look. Caraxes stared at her. You would risk this? Remain here, alone, surrounded by dragons who could kill you at any moment if we believe we've been deceived. If I'm not willing to risk my own life on this, why should you risk your entire species? Rebecca's voice was steady. Besides, I meant what I said. I believe humans can be better than our worst impulses. Time to prove it. The council erupted in discussion. Dragons arguing, debating, some calling for immediate acceptance, others demanding Rebecca's proposal be rejected outright. The noise was overwhelming, hundreds of voices in dozens of languages, the translator devices struggling to keep up. Finally, Thorzen called for silence. This decision cannot be made lightly. Caraxes, you brought these humans here. You violated our oldest traditions by allowing them to set foot on our sacred world. The deciding voice must be yours. You understand what's at stake. Caraxes looked at Rebecca for a long moment. Then he turned toward the healing chambers, where his daughter and hundreds of other hatchlings lay dying. When he spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. I vote yes. Let them come. Let them see our shame. Let them witness dragons brought low by our own arrogance and our own mistakes. And perhaps, his voice cracked slightly, let them teach us what they learned from surviving their own failures. Because I would rather live with humiliation than bury my daughter. The vote was called. It wasn't unanimous. Nearly a third of the council voted against, their objections noted formally in the record. But the majority agreed, swayed by Caraxus's plea and Starscale's challenge, and perhaps, Rebecca hoped, by the simple logic that pride wasn't worth more than children's lives. As the council began to disperse, Verathorn approached Rebecca. The high healer looked exhausted, his scales dull with stress. You will have our cooperation, human. But know this, we will be watching. Every action your people take will be monitored. Every piece of equipment inspected. The slightest hint of betrayal will mean my life, Rebecca finished. I know. I'm counting on that to keep everyone honest. As she turned to leave, Grant caught her arm. Boss, what you did back there, offering yourself as collateral, was necessary, she said. They needed to see that humans can commit to something beyond profit. Besides, she allowed herself a small smile, I meant it when I said I believe we can be better. Time to prove it to ourselves as much as to them. Laura was already on her communicator, contacting Terraform Solutions. Within hours, the contracts would be drawn up. Within days, the first ships would arrive. And Rebecca would remain on Drakerthal, a hostage to humanity's better nature. She just hoped that better nature showed up. Terraform Solutions arrived with enough equipment to clean a dozen worlds. Massive ships descended from orbit, their hulls emblazoned with the company logo. Processing plants assembled themselves in designated zones, their modular construction allowing them to fit together like puzzle pieces. Within a week, the operation was in full swing. What surprised Rebecca was that the CEO came personally. Vincent Walsh stepped off the lead transport wearing an expensive suit that looked ridiculous on a construction site. He was in his 50s, sharp-eyed, with the kind of smile that never quite reached his eyes. Most executives sent underlings to handle field operations. The fact that Walsh was here himself made Rebecca's instincts prickle with suspicion. Administrator Hayes, Walsh greeted her with a firm handshake. Impressive work you've done here. Convincing dragons to accept human help. That takes serious diplomatic skill. Just doing what needed to be done, Rebecca said, watching him carefully. Your team settling in okay? Perfectly. Though I must say, seeing dragon technology up close is remarkable. The way they integrate biological systems with mechanical functions, the genetic engineering capabilities. His eyes gleamed as he looked toward the nearest dragon city. Revolutionary stuff. Could change everything we know about medicine, manufacturing, energy production. There it was. That look. Rebecca had seen it before in corporate types who viewed everything as a potential asset to exploit. She made a mental note to keep a closer eye on Walsh. The cleanup operations began smoothly enough. Human crews installed massive filtration arrays at key points in the water table. Engineers mapped contamination patterns and designed extraction routes. Ships patrolled the upper atmosphere, collecting debris before it could burn up and add more toxins to the environment. The dragons watched everything with barely concealed hostility. But they watched and they allowed the work to continue, and slowly the contamination levels began to drop. Rebecca spent her days coordinating between human crews and dragon overseers, and her nights reviewing progress reports in the quarters they'd given her. It was exhausting work, but she could see results. The hatchlings in the healing chambers were showing improvement. Not dramatic but measurable. Their scales were brightening. Their breathing came easier. It was working. Then, 3 weeks into the operation, Grant pulled her aside during an inspection tour. His face was grim. Boss, we need to talk. Privately. They found an isolated corner of the human base, away from monitoring equipment. Grant pulled out his scanner and showed her a map of the contamination spread. I've been analyzing the distribution patterns, he said quietly. Running models, checking trajectories. Something's been bothering me since we started, and I finally figured out what. Rebecca studied the map. What am I looking at? The contamination is too even. See these concentrations here and here and here? He highlighted several zones. If this was random debris falling from orbit, you'd expect hotspots. Areas where big chunks landed and spread contamination locally. But this is almost uniform across the entire northern hemisphere. Could be atmospheric distribution, Rebecca suggested, though her gut was already telling her something was wrong. That's what I thought at first. But look at this. He overlaid the debris field trajectory. Based on the station's destruction coordinates and orbital mechanics, most of the wreckage should have fallen here. He pointed to a region that showed moderate contamination, not the heaviest. The worst contamination is in areas that shouldn't have received much debris at all. Rebecca felt her blood run cold. Unless the debris was guided. Exactly. I went back through the original station wreckage. Boss, there are micro-thrusters on some of these pieces. Disguised as structural damage, but they're there. Someone controlled where this stuff fell. Show me. Grant pulled up detailed scans of debris they'd collected. Sure enough, tiny propulsion systems were embedded in the wreckage. Sophisticated ones, designed to look like they'd been destroyed in the attack but actually still functional. The hull breaches too, Grant continued. I had Laura analyze them. They're not consistent with plasma weapon damage. They're controlled demolitions. Someone blew that station apart from the inside, made it look like dragon weapons did it. Rebecca's mind raced. The mining corporation. Stellar Core. They did this deliberately? That's what the evidence says. But why would they poison a dragon world? What's the endgame? Rebecca thought about Walsh's gleaming eyes when he looked at dragon technology. About how convenient it was that dragons who would never negotiate with humans, suddenly desperately needed human help. About the technology exchange that was part of the cleanup contract. Oh no, she whispered. We need to find Walsh. Right now. She located the CEO in one of the dragon medical facilities, supposedly touring their healing techniques. When she confronted him in his private office back at the human base, Walsh didn't even try to deny it. You're clever, administrator. I was wondering if you'd figure it out. He poured himself a drink, completely relaxed. Yes, Stellar Core contaminated the water deliberately. The whole thing was planned from the start. You poisoned children. Rebecca's voice shook with fury. Hundreds of them. You made them suffer and die just to, what? Get access to dragon technology? To create an opportunity, Walsh corrected calmly. Dragons wouldn't negotiate with us. They wanted no human presence on their world, no trade, no contact. They were sitting on medical technology that could cure every disease humanity faces, genetic engineering that could extend our lifespans by centuries, energy systems that could revolutionize our entire civilization. All locked away behind their arrogant superiority complex. He took a sip of his drink. So Stellar Core created a crisis that only humans could solve. A problem that would force dragons to let us in, to work with us, to share their knowledge. And it worked perfectly. We're here. We have access to everything we need. In another year we'll have enough data to replicate their key technologies. People died, Rebecca said through clenched teeth. Children died in agony because you wanted to steal technology. A handful of casualties to save millions of human lives in the long run. Dragon medical technology alone will prevent more deaths than their hatchlings numbered. It's simple mathematics, administrator. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. You're insane. I'm pragmatic. Walsh set down his glass. And you're going to help me complete the plan. Because if you expose this, what happens? Dragons discover that humans deliberately poison their children. They'll be furious. They'll slaughter every human in their space. Our species will go to war. Millions will die on both sides, maybe billions. And for what? To satisfy your moral outrage? He leaned forward. Or you stay quiet. We complete the cleanup successfully. The dragons survive, their children recover, and they never know the truth. We get our technology exchange. Both species benefit in the end. Everyone wins except your precious conscience. Rebecca's hand hovered over her communicator. One call to Caraxes would end this. One call would expose the truth. And possibly start an interstellar war. You're assuming I care more about human lives than doing what's right, she said quietly. I'm assuming you're not stupid enough to throw away millions of lives to make yourself feel morally superior. You want to be the hero? Fine. Be the hero who saves both species by keeping her mouth shut about uncomfortable truths. Rebecca stared at him for a long moment. Then she turned and walked out without another word. She found Grant and Laura in the engineering bay and showed them everything. Grant was furious, pacing like a caged animal. Laura wanted to expose Walsh immediately, consequences be damned. We have to tell them, Laura insisted. The dragons deserve to know the truth. And when they know? Grant challenged. You think they'll just forgive us? They'll kill every human on this planet, probably declare war on our colonies. Walsh is a monster, but he's not wrong about what happens if this gets out. So we let him get away with it? Laura's voice rose. We let him profit from murdering children? No, Rebecca said quietly. Both of them turned to look at her. We tell the truth. All of it. We expose everything Walsh did, everything Stellar Core did. We let the dragons know exactly how they were betrayed. Rebecca, that's suicide, Grant protested. Maybe. Or maybe it's the only way forward. She met their eyes. Walsh thinks humans only act out of self-interest. That we'll choose the easy lie over the hard truth because we're fundamentally selfish. If we prove him right, what does that say about us? What does that say about our entire species? It says we survive, Grant said bluntly. At what cost? Our humanity? Rebecca shook her head. I told the Dragon Council that humans could be better than our worst impulses. That we could be trusted with important, sensitive situations. If I hide this, I prove that was a lie. I prove we're exactly what the dragons always thought we were. Laura was quiet for a moment. They might kill us. You know that, right? Yeah, I know. But they might also learn the same lesson we did. That species grow up when they face their ugliest truths and choose to be better anyway. That's the only way this works long-term. Not through lies and manipulation, but through honesty even when it hurts. You're betting both our lives on Dragon Mercy, Grant said. I'm betting our lives on the principle that doing the right thing matters more than doing the safe thing. You with me? They looked at each other. Finally, Grant sighed. You know I am. Somebody's got to keep you from getting killed when this all goes sideways. I'm in too, Laura said. But for the record, this is the craziest thing I've ever been part of. Rebecca tried to contact Caraxes directly, but Walsh's people intercepted her communications. The CEO had apparently anticipated this and locked down all outgoing transmissions from the human base. She'd have to go in person. Getting past Walsh's security meant sneaking out during the night shift, dodging patrols, and hiking 3 miles to the nearest dragon settlement. By the time she reached Caraxes's residence, she was exhausted, covered in mud, and had twisted her ankle jumping over a barrier. The dragon was awake, watching his daughter sleep in a healing pod that had been moved to his home. Starscale looked better, her scales gleaming faintly in the dim light, breathing steady and deep. Administrator Hayes, Caraxes said softly, surprised. Why are you here at this hour? And why do you look like you've been running from something? Because I have. And because I need to tell you something that's going to make you want to kill me. Rebecca took a deep breath. But you deserve the truth, and humanity deserves the chance to prove we can be honest even when it destroys us. She told him everything. The deliberate contamination. The micro-thrusters. The controlled demolition. Walsh's confession. The whole conspiracy laid bare. Caraxes listened in silence. As Rebecca spoke, his expression shifted from confusion to disbelief to a rage so profound she could feel the heat radiating from his scales intensifying. When she finished, he stood to his full height, wings spreading, claws extending. For a moment, Rebecca was certain she was about to die. You come to me, Caraxes said, his voice dangerously soft, and tell me that humans deliberately poisoned my daughter. That they watched our children suffer and die as part of a calculated plan to steal our knowledge. And you expect what? Forgiveness? Understanding? No, Rebecca said. I expect fury. I expect you to call the council and demand every human be removed from your world. I expect consequences for what my species did. Because those consequences are deserved. Then why tell me? Why not let the lie stand? You would have been safe. We would never have known. Because safe isn't the same as right. Because if humans are ever going to be worthy of respect from species like yours, we have to prove we can value truth over comfort. We have to show that some of us at least care more about justice than survival. Caraxes was silent for a long time, his massive form trembling with barely restrained rage. Then he looked down at his sleeping daughter. You risked your life to tell me this truth. You condemned your own people to my wrath. Why? Because she deserved better, Rebecca said, nodding towards Starscale. They all did. And because I'd rather die honest than live as part of a species that profits from murdering children. That's not who I want humanity to be. The dragon studied her face for what felt like forever. Then he did something Rebecca didn't expect. He called the council. 6 months had passed since that terrible night when Rebecca stood before the Dragon Council and watched her world nearly end. 6 months since Caraxes had summoned every dragon leader to hear the truth about what humans had done. She could still remember the roars of rage that shook the chamber, the calls for immediate execution, the overwhelming tide of fury that threatened to consume everything. Thorzen had demanded blood. Half the council wanted every human expelled from dragon space permanently. A few of the younger, angrier dragons had called for outright war. But then something unexpected happened. Starscale, still weak but recovering, had dragged herself into the council chamber. Rebecca would never forget the sight of that small dragon, barely strong enough to stand, positioning herself between Rebecca and the assembled fury of her people. "If you kill her," Starscale had said, her young voice cutting through the chaos, "you teach the galaxy that honesty is punished. That truth-tellers die while liars prosper. The humans who poisoned us are still free. But this human who risked everything to expose them you would execute? What does that make us?" The argument that followed lasted for hours. But eventually, slowly, a different kind of justice emerged. Not the justice of revenge but something harder and more complex. A joint tribunal with both dragon and human judges. A trial that would examine not just Walsh's crimes, but the systems that enabled them. Now, standing in the observation deck of the completed filtration facility, Rebecca watched the final water quality report scroll across her display. The springs of Drakerthal ran pure again. The contamination levels had dropped to nearly undetectable. In the healing chambers, the last of the hatchlings were being released, their scales bright and their movements strong. They'd done it. Against all odds, despite the betrayal and the rage and the near collapse of everything, they'd actually done it. Impressive numbers. Verathorn's voice came from behind her. The high healer approached, his scales looking healthier than they had in months. The stress of watching children die had aged him, but recovery had brought some of that vitality back. "Your species' technology is crude but effective." "High praise coming from you," Rebecca said with a slight smile. "I remember when you called us primitives who couldn't handle basic genetic manipulation. I was wrong." The admission seemed to cost the ancient dragon something. "Not about your genetic capabilities, you're still terrible at that. But about dismissing what you do know. Your environmental engineering, your crisis management, your ability to solve problems through sheer stubborn persistence. These are valuable skills." He moved to stand beside her, looking out over the restored landscape. "We dragons have lived so long in our superiority that we forgot a fundamental truth. Every species knows something we don't. Every civilization has wisdom born from their unique struggles. Humans know a lot about cleaning up messes," Rebecca agreed. "We've had plenty of practice. And now you've taught us." Verathorn glanced at her. "Grant and I published our first joint research paper last week. Combining dragon genetic therapy with human pharmacological approaches. We've cured a neurological condition that both our species thought was untreatable." Rebecca had seen the paper. It had caused quite a stir in medical communities across multiple worlds. Dragons and humans working together, not in a hierarchy of superior and inferior, but as equals with different expertise. "How's the trial going?" she asked. Verathorn's expression darkened. "Walsh and his conspirators are facing judges from 7 different species now. The evidence is overwhelming. They'll spend the rest of their lives in a maximum security facility on Titan Station. Their assets have been seized, funneled into the new Joint Environmental Protection Agency." Good. Rebecca felt no sympathy for Walsh. He'd gambled that humans would choose comfortable lies over hard truths. He'd lost that bet and now he'd pay the price. "The more interesting development is the treaty," Verathorn continued. 53 articles outlining cooperation between our species. Technology sharing, environmental protection, medical research, cultural exchange. Thorzen fought against it, of course, but even he couldn't deny the logic. Rebecca had read the treaty. It was unprecedented. Dragons were notoriously isolationist, but the crisis had forced them to reconsider their position. And humans, shown in the worst possible light by Walsh's crimes, had been given a chance to prove they could be better. A chance Rebecca and people like her had fought desperately to earn. "Administrator Hayes?" A young voice called out. Rebecca turned to see Starscale gliding through the observation deck entrance. The young dragon had grown in the past 6 months, her scales now a brilliant gold that caught the light beautifully. She moved with the easy grace of someone fully recovered. "Starscale," Rebecca greeted her warmly. "You're flying well. No more breathing troubles?" "None at all. The healers say I'm completely recovered." Starscale landed beside them, folding her wings carefully. "I wanted to give you something before you leave." "Leave?" Rebecca blinked in surprise. "The Council has approved the permanent human settlement," Verathorn explained. "But they've also recognized that you've been away from your own people for a long time. You're free to return to Tertius 7 if you wish, or to take the position as administrator of the joint research community here." Rebecca hadn't expected to have a choice. She'd assumed the dragons would want her gone the moment the cleanup finished. Starscale reached up with one claw and carefully pulled loose a scale from her chest. Rebecca knew enough about dragon biology now to understand what that meant. Scales didn't fall off easily. Removing one deliberately was painful. "This is for you," Starscale said, offering the scale. It was about the size of Rebecca's palm, gleaming gold with hints of copper at the edges. Dragon scales can be enchanted to hold certain properties. This one contains a fragment of my magic. If you ever need help, anywhere in the galaxy, press it and call out. I'll hear you. And I'll come. "I can't accept this," Rebecca protested. "It's too valuable." "You saved my life," Starscale interrupted firmly. "You risked everything, your safety, your career, your entire species' reputation, to tell the truth that could have gotten you killed. Dragons remember their debts, Rebecca Hayes. Please, let me honor mine." Rebecca took the scale carefully, feeling the warmth of it in her hand. There was a subtle vibration to it, like a heartbeat. "Thank you," she said softly. "I'll treasure it." "So what will you choose?" Verathorn asked. "Return home or stay here?" Rebecca thought about Tertius, 7. The mining colony she'd managed for 6 years, keeping desperate people alive through corporate negligence and impossible conditions. She thought about the friends she'd made there, the community she'd built. But she also thought about what was happening here on Drakerthal. The joint research teams discovering new medical treatments. The cultural exchange programs where young dragons and human children learned together. The environmental monitoring stations that both species staffed, watching for any sign of renewed contamination. This was something new. Something that had never existed before. A genuine partnership between species that had every reason to hate each other. "I'll stay," she said. "At least for a while. There's still work to do here, and I want to see how this experiment turns out." "Experiment?" Verathorn raised an eye-ridge. "Figuring out if two completely different species can actually work together long-term. If we can build something better than what either of us had separately." Rebecca smiled. "Seems worth trying." Over the next few weeks, Rebecca watched the permanent settlement take shape. Families from Tertius, 7 arrived, people tired of corporate exploitation and excited about the possibility of something different. Dragon volunteers helped with construction, their strength and precision making the work go faster than any human crew could have managed alone. There were problems, of course. Cultural misunderstandings happened daily. Dragons found human inefficiency frustrating. Humans found dragon arrogance irritating. Arguments broke out over everything from building designs to meal schedules to the proper way to educate children. But people worked through it. They compromised, adapted, learned from each other. One evening, Rebecca found Caraxes sitting alone on a crystal overlook, watching the twin moons rise. She'd grown comfortable enough with dragons to approach without announcing herself. "Beautiful view," she said, settling onto a bench designed for beings much larger than her. "It is," Caraxes agreed. "I've watched these moons rise for 300 years. But tonight they look different somehow." "How so?" "Brighter, perhaps. Or maybe I'm seeing them with new eyes." He turned his massive head toward her. "Do you know what truly shocked us about you, Rebecca Hayes? My stunning good looks and charming personality?" Caraxes made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Your technology was expected. We knew humans were clever in their own crude way. But what we didn't expect was your choice. You could have been the hero who saved us from the poison. Everyone would have celebrated you. Instead, you chose to be the honest person who told us the uncomfortable truth about how we were betrayed." "Heroes are overrated," Rebecca said. "They make everyone feel good, but they don't really change anything. Honesty, though. Honesty makes people grow. I figured you deserved the chance to grow, not just survive." "And what of you? You lost the quiet life you had on Tertius, 7. Rebecca thought about it. "I gained something better. Purpose. Partnership. The chance to be part of something that matters." She touched the scale hanging around her neck on a simple chain. "And friends who happen to be dragons." "Friends?" Caraxes repeated the word thoughtfully. "Yes. I suppose that's what we've become. Strange, isn't it? 6 months ago, I would have rather died than call a human friend. Now I can't imagine having gone through this without you." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the moons climb higher. In the valley below, Rebecca could see lights from both the human settlement and the nearby dragon city. Mixed groups moving between them. Children of both species playing some game that involved a lot of running and wing flapping and laughter. "What happens now?" Caraxes asked eventually. "Now we figure out how to make this work long-term. We'll mess up sometimes. Have fights. Maybe even hate each other on bad days." Rebecca gestured toward the valley. "But we'll also be better. Because the alternative is what almost happened. Pride and greed nearly destroying an entire species. We looked into that abyss together and decided to build bridges instead. Building bridges, Caraxes mused. A human metaphor. But an apt one. The first joint council session was scheduled for the next morning. Rebecca would be there, representing the human settlers alongside dragon leaders. The agenda was packed with contentious issues. Water rights. Technology sharing protocols. Educational standards. Mining restrictions. Would be messy. People would argue. Nobody would agree on everything. But everyone would stay in the room. As Rebecca headed back to prepare for the session, she thought about how far they'd all come. Dragons had sought human aid expecting simple technology. What they'd gotten instead was something far more valuable and far more complicated. Honesty. Partnership. The realization that strength didn't mean knowing everything, but having the courage to admit what you didn't know. And humans had learned something too. That being clever wasn't enough. That short-term gains built on lies would always collapse eventually. That the hard path of truth, even when it endangered everything, was the only path that led anywhere worth going. The plague that almost destroyed the dragons had become the crucible that forged something neither species could have created alone. A future where pride and pragmatism, magic and science, ancient wisdom and youthful innovation built something entirely new. Rebecca entered the council chamber the next morning to find it already full. Dragons on their traditional perches, humans in specially designed seating that let them participate as equals. The agenda appeared on holographic displays. Thorzen called the session to order. His voice still carried authority, but there was something different in his tone now. Not quite warmth, but perhaps respect. We gather today as partners, the ancient dragon began. Not because we chose this path willingly, but because crisis forced us to recognize what we should have known all along. That wisdom belongs to no single species. That every civilization, no matter how young or old, has something to teach. He looked directly at Rebecca. 6 months ago, a human administrator stood before us and offered an ugly truth when a comfortable lie would have served her better. That choice, more than any technology or treaty, showed us what partnership could mean. Today we begin the work of proving that choice was worth making. The session began. It was chaotic, passionate, sometimes heated. Dragons and humans argued over details, challenged each other's assumptions, pushed back against proposals they disagreed with. But nobody left. Nobody gave up. They worked through problems together, finding solutions that neither species would have reached alone. And as Rebecca watched dragons and humans collaborating, compromising, slowly building something new, she allowed herself to hope. Not for perfection. Not for easy harmony. But for something more valuable. For a galaxy where different species could look past their pride, acknowledge their mistakes and choose to grow together. Where truth mattered more than comfort. Where partnership was stronger than superiority. Where the courage to be honest, even when it hurt, opened doors that lies could never reach. The plague was over. The real work of building a future together was just beginning. And Rebecca Hayes, former mining colony administrator turned bridge builder between species, smiled as she opened her notes and prepared to help write the next chapter.